What's going on, guys? This is Lewis from Counterculture Podcast, and we got here,
Anthony, this is Anthony, guys. What's up?
man. If you guys haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, follow us on Spotify. But today we are kicking off episode 10 of Counterculture Podcast. This season, during season 2, we've been talking about the information of the theological view of Satan, the world, and sin. But today, we have designed an episode to encourage you when faced with the tactics of Satan. It will motivate you and help you continue living a godly life.
Yeah, so today, actually, finally, Lewis always tries to encourage me to give some sort of description or some sort of title, but I always tell him I suck at those. But I actually titled this one pretty
not that
good.
bad.
Pretty good. It's Stop Buying the Bait. Stop
Hmm.
buying the bait. And so obviously you think of a fish or you think of something that you're baiting. And so what's interesting is that we've talked about sin, we've talked about the world, we've talked about the devil, and I think a lot of our episodes are geared toward providing knowledge, providing information, a
Which is good.
theology, which is a really good thing. But I think what we were talking amongst each other is that, knowledge, it's amazing, it's great, it's applicable, it's a utility, but it doesn't change our lives. And so one thing we wanted to do is we wanted to help guide all the information, all the knowledge, everything that we've been putting together all into this one power-packed episode in order to better help you navigate through life.
So you mean there's going to be a bunch of quotes today?
Exactly. You
Get
get
your paper,
ready.
get your notepad. We're
Yep.
going in.
Get ready, guys. You guys are going to want to get some of these added on you. So I just
Added.
remember, so when I think of the idea of bait, when I think of the idea of sin or all these different things,
Mhm.
I remember this one time. I actually worked in this office, and in this office, it was interesting because on the first day, I was getting ready to clock off, and when I was getting ready to clock off for the day, I had a coworker, and she actually went to this cupboard. And in this cupboard, what they did is they pulled out some, like, it's pebbles, and so what they began to do was they began to sprinkle the pebbles all around the cabinets, all around the refrigerator. This is in the break room, of course. We don't just have a refrigerator in our office, but this is the break room
I
area.
do. I have one in my office.
Oh, you're a lucky one.
Mm-hmm.
So they just continue just pouring it and putting it, and I'm just looking at them with this bizarre look on my eyes because first of all, is it even sanitary to keep poison inside the same cabinet you keep the food? I don't know. But, they keep putting it on the corners, they put it in the fridge area, they put it everywhere. And I begin to ask what's going on, and they say that they begin to have rat droppings and that they've been having like a rat infestation. There's been all these rats coming around. It was very disgusting to know on your first day at a new job.
I don't think I want dinner anymore.
Yeah, I think you're gonna stick to Jesus's meal plan, fasting for
Mhm.
30 days and 30 nights. So yeah, so it was interesting because as they were putting the pebbles, I was like, okay, what's like so good about the pebbles? Because what's gonna happen when the rat eats them? And it was funny because I discovered in that moment that they began to talk about how the special chemical that they purchased, the special bait that they purchased, was one that contained 99% rat food and 1% poison. And I thought of that. And as we're preparing for this, and as I was thinking about what to talk about on this episode, what I found is that so many times Satan he will feed us a 99% truth only to lure us in order that he can entrap us with a sinful lifestyle. And so he might bring this amazing man or amazing woman into your life only for you to be sucked in and trapped and falling into a temptation. He might give you an amazing opportunity, but then you find yourself having no time for your spouse. You have no time for your kids. You have no time for your friends. You have no time for God even. And so what I think about is that so many of us, we need to understand that the enemy, his ability, like I said in episode 1 of this whole season, is that his whole strategy really is to disorder your desires with his deceptive ideas in order to disorient your entire living. And so he's gonna feed you lies. He's gonna feed you the things that you love, the things that you like. And so he's gonna do that with the intention of trapping you. And so I like to say it this way, is that Satan, you got to think. He's going to offer us something that's appealing to our appetite in order to lure us in, right?
Right.
And so I think we need to stop failing to realize that scripture shows us that everything he's feeding us ultimately leads us to destruction. It leads us to destruction, it leads us to death. And so I think we need to stop and we need to think for a moment because we shouldn't be a people that is constantly falling into the trap of feeding into our flesh until fatality. I mean, just think. You're Some of us, we get in these moments where we are constantly feeding into our flesh until it leads us to our own fatality. Because the thing that at one time was pleasing to our eye will one time start to actually kill us and diminish our life. And so, I just want to say that again. Don't fall into the trap of feeding your flesh until the point that it actually causes fatality in your life. Because the thing that once satisfied you in your life will one day start to kill you.
See, that's good because I'm in a stage right now where I'm in a health transition where I'm trying to live a healthier lifestyle. I'm trying to do different things. Like today, that 1% was like, man, those jalapeno poppers look good. Like I really want to get that. But if I do that, I'm gonna resort back to myself of feeling bloated, feeling, just unsatisfied and not feeling good about myself. Such as the things that you're saying, just that 1% when no matter what it is, it's gonna it's gonna feel good, but eventually that 99% is gonna overshadow everything. Sometimes the devil seems to consistently try to bribe us to buy into the lies, buy into the bait in life. But what is something that our listeners could know when facing the bait that they have in their own lives?
Yeah, temptation, what it is it's so relevant because we're
Yeah,
all tempted with one thing. I think you were just talking about it on Instagram where you were saying that, you're now dieting, you're
yeah,
changing your lifestyle. And so even driving down the street, you're tempted with all of these ideas, these restaurants, drinks and meals and
hmm,
all these different things. And so I think it's important that we understand that when faced with a temptation, the most important thing when you're faced with temptation is to understand how important, just really focus in on how important it is to understand that God, he is omnipresent, meaning that he is constantly with you and inside of you. Because look, I think that some of us need to have some sort of confidence when we are being tempted because what's inside of you, the Spirit of God is inside of you. And if that Spirit is inside of you, that means it is a greater spirit than any opposition that you are facing in your life. And so I want us to say that again. Some of us, we need to have some confidence in life when facing temptation, when facing opposition, because the reality is that greater is he that is in you. That power that is in you is greater than any opposition. Allow that opposition that you are faced with to be an opportunity for God to show himself in your life. And so I want you to think of this and understand this really because we as humans, we are open loop creatures. And what that means is that we are accustomed to our environment and we're accustomed to our settings. And so that means when someone tells you a joke, you laugh, right? If it's a funny joke.
sometimes, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, if you got a sense of humor, I'll laugh at your joke. But hey, and then you watch a sad movie, and what happens? You cry. You
hmm,
watch Toy Story 3, you cry, you're sad. And so, we're open loop creatures. So if I go to a comedy show, I laugh. If I go to a sad movie, I cry. If I go to a horror film, I'm probably terrified. And so we're open loop creatures. We succumb to our surroundings. And so what I want to say is this is that although we are open loop creatures, it's important to know that that same impact that your surroundings can set on you is the same way that your spirit can impact your surroundings. And so, just as much as the negativity can impact your current positivity, so you might walk into work full of faith, full of positivity, but then that one coworker comes at you with all the negativity in the world and it just completely diminishes your day. I want you to remember we are open loop creatures. That means that if you have some sort of positivity, you have the power of God moving in your life, you have the Spirit of God guiding you and leading you, the same positivity that is in you can override and overpower the negativity that is outside of you. Here's the thing is that I think some of us, what we're trapped in is this mindset that we are so focused on what's going on around us that it actually leads us to forgetting the God that is within us. And I'm going to say that one more time because a lot of us, we show up to work and there's a true temptation, there's a true trial, there's something that we are faced with, whether it be a financial obstacle, whether it be a metaphysical obstacle, a physical obstacle, a relational obstacle. And I want you to remember this because we need, not just you, but it's a we because we're all in this together. We need to stop focusing on the surrounding and we need to start focusing on the God that is inside of us because that God has the power to override the darkness that is surrounding you in life.
Essentially, I think what he's trying to get at is no matter where we go, whatever temptation follows us, God is with us. God's going to be with us when whatever situation you walk through in life.
Yeah.
That's where that little voice that you hear in your head. That's probably God telling you, don't do that. Don't eat those chicken nuggets. Don't go have that drink with that person. Don't go do those things. That's God in you telling you not to do those things. But I think so many people may receive God dreams and God visions for their life, and they still end up being tested through temptation. And that is one of the most testing times that we find ourselves in. But how would you approach the idea of temptation?
Yeah, because the reality is that temptation, it doesn't, temptation's not limited to a certain salary. It's not limited to a certain job title. Temptation is
Nobody's
always
exempt.
exactly. Nobody is ever going to be exempt to temptation. Temptation is always there. And what I find so many times in young leaders, young entrepreneurs, just young people who are striving to reach a goal, what I find is that so many people, what happens to them is they receive a dream, they receive a vision, they get a goal for their lives, and you find so many stories of people that they actually fail to pass the test of temptation, that they fall off of their platform as fast as it took them to get there. And so I want to say this is that the key when it comes to pursuing your goals, pursuing your dreams, pursuing that God given vision, the key to that when faced with temptation is not allowing your dream to take you to a place where your character cannot keep you. And so I'm going to say that just one more time so it could sound a little clearer for you guys. The key when faced with temptation is one thing you have to remember in life is that the key to it all is not allowing your dreams to take you somewhere that your character will not sustain you. So wherever you're at, if your dreams are taking you to a large platform, if your dreams are taking you to a large influence, remember that passing that moment of temptation is so vital because if your dreams can take you somewhere far in life, your vision can take you so far in life, but if you don't have the character to sustain your life in that environment, you're going to fall as fast as you even got up there. And I think a lot of us, we love high platforms. We
Hmm.
love influence.
The title.
Yeah, we love it. We love the title. We love the income. We love the prestige. But a lot of us, we don't have the character to stay there. One of my favorite men in the Bible, his name's Joseph, and he was actually found. Well, his story is found in the book of Genesis, and Joseph was actually sold into slavery by his family. And he ends up finding himself working for the Pharaoh at the time. And he finds himself, and it's so awesome because he finds himself in a situation where the Pharaoh's wife is actually attempting to have sex with Joseph. And what I think is so amazing is that Joseph says this quote, and I'm gonna read from the quote. And it says, when faced with the opportunity to have sex with Pharaoh's wife, this is Joseph's response. He says, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" So I'm going to repeat that one more time. He says, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" What I love so much about Joseph's response is that Joseph, he was living in a time where it was 7th century BC. But I want you to realize something for a minute. The 10 commandments that teach us about the wrongdoing of adultery were not invented until the 16th to 13th century. I love it so much because we find that Joseph, he didn't actually have a written law. He didn't actually have the word of God to reference in that moment. He didn't know that it was wrong to commit adultery. But what I find is that although Joseph, He might have not had a written law to reference, but he had a conviction in his heart. And so I want to say that again, is that Joseph, he might have not had, a written law anywhere in his hands, but he had a written law that convicted him to the point that was inside of his heart. And that one thing that I think that we can learn from Joseph, and one thing that Joseph does ultimately that we could all benefit from is that he counts the cost when falling into temptation. Just think, he counts the cost of what it would cost him to lose with his relationship with God, his relationship with Pharaoh, his relationship with everyone in the court. And I understand completely that we live in a world where there's temptation everywhere. I mean, every time I'm walking downtown in LA, I always love it because I'm always with my friends and we're going out to have dinner, and everywhere you walk there's temptation. I mean, you walk down the street, there's temptation to go get a drink, have a
Mhm.
little bit of too much to drink. You have a temptation to go to a strip club. You got a lust of the eyes. You have some,
I'm saying this stuff because we're human.
yeah.
We following Christ doesn't make us perfect, guys.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's my point, is that you find yourself faced, I mean, all of us, you're faced with an influence. And so some of us just handle that temptation somewhat better. I mean, whether you're around someone who smokes, you have the temptation there because most likely they'd offer you a cigarette if you were willing.
Yeah, I'll
So
revert that point all the way back to season 1 where we talked about a Jesus community.
mhm,
You are who you surround yourself with. Say you're walking down the street in Hollywood and you got that temptation, but if you're around those people who will pull you in a different direction, like not even to where you even think about that stuff, but you're moving forward and you're walking past those things and you don't even have that desire. Surround yourself with people like that, man.
yeah, I agree. And that's the point, is that we are all faced with some sort of temptation. Some things, like I said, lure us in, some things don't. Some things appeal to our appetite, some things don't. But here's the important thing, is that although you might be faced with a temptation, although you might be faced with, all these different things that surround you, it's important to understand this, is that this is exactly why scripture teaches us that we do not live by sight, but we live by faith. See, because I can see a lot of temptation. I can see a lot of things that I would love to do. But see, when I decide to close my eyes and when begin to just live by what the word of God is showing me, what the voice of God is guiding me to do, you will find yourself in a much better place because you're choosing not to face your temptations because you're choosing to face the voice of God.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys are listening to us on Spotify or something, I just had a blank face because I'm just listening to him. Like, that's good stuff. You guys, I'm married. You can't see my ring, but if you're listening, I'm married. And, social media, man, you scroll, and there's temptation everywhere. But what do? I mean, I could simply just unfollow and it's done, gone. And it's about what you do with that temptation. But I feel like temptation is always around us, correct? As you're just mentioning, whether it be through impurity, idolatry, or even gluttony. But what about the times that we aren't around temptation? Because it seems like temptation still finds its way into our lives somehow. But I think a lot of times temptation seems like an urge that we have to do and feed into. Like it's that simple compromise, that simple lie. Like we have to feed into that temptation. And once we do, it's okay. But eventually it's gonna hurt us down, little throughout our life.
Yeah. So the thing is this, is that I think a lot of us, we think of the idea of temptation, and we need to understand that, many of us, we find ourselves planning to fail because we have failed to plan. Because here's the reality, is that if you don't stand for something in life, you'll begin to fall for anything. And I'm going to say that again because a lot of times what I find when I'm talking to people, when I'm mentoring people, when I'm sitting down having some conversations, a lot of the reoccurring actions that happen prior to someone actually falling or failing at a dream, failing at life, failing at a morality, goal that they had, what I find so many times is that they have planned to fail because they have failed to plan. And I just want that to sink in because you as a person, you are standing for something. You're standing for yourself, you're standing for money, you're standing for God, you're standing for your employment, you're standing for status, you're standing for something. And so what I want to say is that if you don't stand for something in life, you're going to begin to fall for anything. Some of us, we want a game plan when we're stuck in our sin. Well, when we're stuck in our mess. And that's why I love Joseph so much, because Joseph made a decision in his heart when he was faced with the opportunity to have sex with another man's wife. He already made his mind up in his own heart, because that's why, if you read the story in Genesis, it's an amazing story. But in scripture, it says that it got so bad that this woman was grabbing onto his clothes, pleading for him to have sex with her. And it says that he fled. He took off. You know why? Because he made that decision in his heart. He knew that in his heart, he wasn't going to be a man that disobeyed God. He wasn't going to be a man that disobeyed Pharaoh, his boss. He was going to be a man who actually resembled what it meant to be a man of God. And so he was a man that represented this idea that he was standing for God. And so he didn't fall for the trap. He didn't fall for the bait. He didn't fall for the temptation. And here's the thing, is that I don't personally believe in naming and identifying and, scrutinizing people and naming their sin for every single sin. But let's be honest. The devil, he's going to deceive us. He's going to pervert things, and he's going to destroy things in our life. And so just think, food, the context of food. Food is amazing. It's an amazing thing that we have. But when you take food out of moderation, it could actually hurt you. It can give you diseases. It can give you diabetes. It can give you gluttony. You can have all these things. And so I want to be a little bit practical to kind of get a little deeper, because I believe that the more things, here's the thing, whatever you fail to face, whatever you continue to tolerate in your life, it's never going to change. And so I just want to say these things so that we can face these things together head on. And so I want to be practical, because if you are a struggling alcoholic, let's just be practical. You have no business at a bar, because here's the thing. Sin, it's always going to happen at the intersection of desire and opportunity. If you remove the opportunity to sin, you're going to remove the desire to sin. And I'm going to say that just one more time, guys. Sin, it will always happen at the intersection of desire and opportunity. If you erase and remove the opportunity to sin in your life, I promise you're going to remove the desire to sin in your life. And some of you listening, you're addicted to porn. You're addicted to watching it every single night, like we referenced, last week. Yet the interesting thing is that we can admit to these things. We can go to these meetings and go to these counseling moments and these therapeutic moments where we sit down with a counselor or a therapist and we admit these things, or sit down with a pastor or mentor and we can admit, hey, yeah, I'm addicted to watching porn. But yet so many times what I find is that so many people that are addicted to watching porn day in and day out, I'll ask them this question, and I'll say this. Well, where do you sleep? Where does your phone sleep? And they respond to me. They say, well, it's on my charger next to my bed. So let me make this clear. What you're telling me is that you've addressed and you've analyzed your life to the point that you understand you have an addiction to porn. But how do you expect to defeat the enemy if you're actually sleeping with the enemy? See, all of us struggle. We all struggle. All of us. I struggle. Lewis struggles.
We all have different struggles in our life. Like he's talking about impurity. We all have our own struggles. So whatever you're naming, we all have our own struggle.
Exactly. But have you just ever wondered why we continue to face the same struggles throughout our life? It's because the devil, he's not dumb. The devil has a strategy. Just think of boxing for a minute. Boxers, what they do, they don't always go, for the tough punches and knock you out. What they'll do is they'll find your weak areas. Maybe it's your rib cage, maybe it's your arm, whatever it is, and they'll begin to poke at it, to punch it. And I think that's so much of what the enemy does, is he's going to find your weak spots and he's going to continue to punch it, to blow on it that way in order to ultimately just deconstruct your life. That's his main goal, guys. It's to destroy your life. And so if we're ever going to defeat the enemy, it's going to start with us limiting the opportunity to sin.
So sometimes it feels like people they find themselves in the same seasons over and over and over again, the same issues over and over again, and they just end up giving into the devil. because it's easy. Um, a few episodes you talked about walking in step with Jesus is the key to living a sin-free life. Would you say that a lot of us who are constantly desiring sin are living a life without Jesus?
No, because it's like what I said last episode. Your strongest desires are actually not your deepest desires. And so you might have a desire to sin, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's your deepest desire. Because if you removed yourself from the equation of where you're going to sin, you'll find that your desire is actually to please God. And so, what I want to say to wrap up this whole episode is this. As much as Satan is so strategic, just think Satan is so strategic. He's so deceitful. He is such a liar. He's such a good liar. He messes with us so good that sometimes we buy into his lies. Let's just be honest. He's a good liar. We listen to him a lot. As good as Satan is at lying and how strategic he is, how much he has a plan for your life to die is, I mean, Jesus says it himself. Jesus says that Satan's goal is to destroy your life and to kill you, to murder you. Just think, if the devil has a strategic goal to kill you, Jesus has a strategic goal to bring you life. I'm going to say that again because if the devil has a goal to put you to death, Jesus has a life to completely rejuvenate you, to revive you, to bring life to you. And I think that some of us need to remember that because it doesn't matter how many times you fall short, but what matters is that you serve a God who has a big dream for you, who has a big goal for you. He continues to desire you. All he wants is to love you and have relationship with you. It's not about how much you've fallen. It's not about how much you have failed. It's about how much more you're willing to get up. See, here's the thing about failure and quitting. You only fail if you fail to get up. You're not a failure if you fall and keep getting up. You're a failure if you fall and fail to get up.
You guys know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button on the video. You guys have been showing a lot of great support. If you can, share it with your family and friends. Send it to them in a text message, whether they watch YouTube, listen on a podcast, listen in Spotify, whatever they listen to, send it to them because just as you needed to hear it, they probably do also. So as I mentioned, subscribe and thanks for tuning in to episode 10. Tune in next week as we got another good episode planned for you guys. This is Counterculture Podcast.